Cool. Hi, everybody. Welcome to SB Agile, SB on Rails, Learn to Code, and what is it, Java? SB Java. So we've got a combined meetup tonight. I'm really excited. So I'm Heidi Helfand. I work here at Appfolio as an Agile coach. I'm one of the co-organizers of SB Agile. And also Rahul Sani is another co-organizer. Karen Madler. We've got Valerie, who you met by the front door. Ellie, who's not here right now. We've got a big group. And special thanks to Kelly for helping us set up the event. And yeah, so we have these meetups monthly. You can follow us on meetup.com/SB-Agile. We're very, very excited to have our guests today. They're from San Marcos, California, down by Escondido, San Diego area. Yeah, so we have Chris Lucian, Jason Kearney, we have Charlotte, Paul, and Wei-Jay, yeah. Working on that all day. Wei-Jay. They're from Hunter Industries, and Hunter makes software for irrigation systems, commercial irrigation systems, and manufactures the equipment as well. And they're going to tell us some stories about mob programming. And we're very excited to hear about how it started, how you do it, and all of that. And yeah, so welcome, guys. Well, you can take it away. And
so, just a real quick poll. How many people know what mob programming is? I'm Chris Lucian. I'm the Director of Software Development at Hunter Industries. This is Jason, and he's a full stack engineer in our environment. We manufacture, we're more of a manufacturing company, not a software company, but we have grown into doing a lot of software development in the company, both internal and external applications. So what is mob programming? It's essentially what you see here. So in this area, we have a cross-functional team solving a complex problem together, and because they are together, they're writing the right code and bringing all the information together in one space and entering it from the same keyboard.
And so, in order to make this work, right, we use a pair programming paradigm called driver-navigator. Right? One person's the keyboard, they're the driver. There's people not at the keyboard, they're the navigators. They're the people coming up with the ideas. The idea here is that in order for an idea to make it into the computer, it must first travel through someone else. This ensures that there's communication and understanding about what's happening. We like to say that the driver is an intelligent input device. It's not entirely true. All right? All right. So we like to say that the driver is an intelligent input device is not entirely true, and the reason is because they're a person. They're going to have ideas. They're going to think about what they want to be putting into the code. What we request is before they take their idea and put it into the code, they turn around. They tell everybody else. And then through the consensus, it comes back into the code. This way, everybody understands what's happening. So what we have here is we have a typical day. It's kind of an old video, but yeah. In the morning, we start with a learning session, sharpening our skills. There's no need for a stand-up. There's no need for meetings. Everybody's there. They kind of get an understanding of what's happening already just because they're there. All the input goes through a single computer. And you know, as I said before, there's a driver. The driver rotates. And all the navigators. We used to do a 15-minute rotation. It changes. I think right now we're averaging 7. Coach. You'll notice there's a flow. We completed a story. We took a short break. We're on to the next one. We're working on one piece, one thing at a time. And we're continuously moving forward on it. And so as we sit here and we work through the day, we have to work together. So we tend to take lunches together. We tend to come in at the same time in the morning. We tend to leave at the same time in the evening. There are exceptions. We have families with people. We understand that. But in general, everything's synchronized. Take lunches together, builds team, builds camaraderie, lets you talk about things other than work. And then we come back in. You'll notice that there was not much of a hesitation. You have 5 brains thinking about the same problem. It's easy to step back in. One person left to do solo work earlier. Him leaving didn't stop the development. Him coming back into the group didn't stop or slow down the development. We have the side computers. The side computers are for research, spikes, related things, but there's no production code built on those side computers. It is entirely just for ideas. And back to the same idea. Yes?
You said this, at least that's what I may not have heard you right. You said one of the side computers were used for spikes?
Yes, prototyping. You might have an idea, you want to prove whether or not it works. And so you're just going to do a rapid prototype, see if it works, and go, hey guys, look, I tried this, it worked, let's examine it more. And yeah, so we use the term spike for that. So that's kind of what it looks like.
All right, so this is kind of what our environment is comprised of now. So we have these 80-inch monitors, 4K resolution. They do quite well for us in making sure that we can communicate well. You'll notice that we say everything is on wheels. Everything is on wheels here. And the big benefit of that is that we have a large open space now, and we can actually rearrange our area however we need to at any time. And so with everything on wheels, we can configure, put 2 teams next to each other, or 2 teams far away from each other, separate them by a whiteboard that helps us cancel out sound, or get people really close together so that they don't miss communications between the teams. We also have a very powerful computer hooked up to this, so you want to run unit tests fast, right? So you don't want to spend a lot of time waiting for your unit tests to run. So the fastest feedback loop possible for the people sitting there is going to be very important. We use a tool called approval tests, which uses gold master testing, gold standard testing. And the idea is that it actually reads files off the file system to do assertions. I won't get too much more into that, but the idea is that we needed to optimize for hard drive on there. So there's PCI Express SSDs in there rated because we want to have the fastest possible read time off of those. So tests that used to take 6 to 10 minutes to run now run in 30 seconds. So we also have 2 mice and 2 keyboards, 1 ergonomic and 1 standard. And you can use either one, both of them are connected to the machine. And we use the mob timer, which is in the back there on the screen right now, to help us rotate. So rather than waiting for a kind of an annoying alarm or something along those lines, we actually blank out the screens and force people to switch because we had a lot of people continuing to type and going forward. Finally, I want to point out hand sanitizer. So we're either really effectively working at creating a giant super germ, or we're keeping each other from being sick, or both. So you know, we do go through a lot of hand sanitizer, and it's kind of an important thing to us.
So how did mob programming start? It started with an act of humility. We had a senior programmer who was working on a problem and realized he didn't have all the information he needed. And the team was training at this point. They were just starting to get exposure with test-driven development, pairing, these good fundamental practices. And he realized he wasn't going to be able to deliver this functionality. And so he turned to the team and asked for help. So quickly, a meeting was called to discuss this problem and how they were going to approach it. in the meeting, someone said, we're talking about the code, let's just pull it up. And so on a projector in the meeting room, they brought the code up, and they quickly found themselves working on it together. They were using practices that they've been developing in their learning sessions. Something called a coding dojo, where one person sits at the keyboard and the person to the left of them navigates. So they started with that, and quickly they realized that everyone had something to contribute, so everyone was navigating. And they were rotating, and the time ended. And so they had to book another room. And within a very short amount of time, I believe a couple days to a week, they hammered out this feature, this problem, or this piece of code that they had to get done that the senior developer didn't know. And immediately they turned around and they retrospected. Everyone felt that this was amazing and wanted to see if they could replicate this kind of productivity, this kind of feeling of being engaged in success. And so they decided to try again, but something that wasn't so critical. And very quickly they found that they spent all their time in meeting rooms. And so that really is how it started. But then what happened is the company started seeing less defects. More people in the company was getting things delivered to them. Overall, the team was being viewed as much more successful. Morale on the team was up. The company's reliance on the team grew. And as they sat there and gathered small successes, the company started realizing they had something that was valuable. And they got something other than a meeting room. They were given their first dedicated mobbing room. Now, this all was predicated on good practices. They focused on quality. And when I talk about quality, I mean whole quality, not just quality of the code, but quality of their interactions with their customers, with other people in the company, quality with themselves. They modified their mobbing room continuously to stop from having sore hands, sore necks, because if you're looking at a projector all day, that actually hurts your neck after a while. And that is kind of what led them to be able to do what they did.
You'll notice we have on here, we've been doing it for 4 years. That was one team. And during that 4 years, we ran into a situation where we actually had no bug reports for a year and a half at all. And during that time, we continued to produce software. We took small iterative slices. We used Kanban and had dedicated product owners. And we were able to produce high quality work and deliver it frequently to our customers. And so during that time, that was us working on internal software development projects to help different areas of the company work faster and better together. And so over the last 6 months now, we've been expanding it to be 6 mobbing teams and to work on external product development. And that's what you see here. This is our new space, and like I said, everything is on wheels. You have 3 80-inch monitors here, you have a space to sit around here, you have hand sanitizer right there. You have different groups of people all working together in collaborative manners. We use the whiteboards as ways to separate the different groups and cancel out sound, and then they can be moved around if needed for better communication. And I want to get into one of the core practices of how we create a high bandwidth learning environment. We actually spend an hour a day every day in the morning to kind of gain alignment, but also to spend that hour as a learning session. And so we actually ask people to do their morning emails, unless there's something urgent, do their morning emails after this hour. We have dedicated 1 hour a day and 2 hours on Friday afternoons to purely sharpening our skills and making sure that we increase in how we learn and how we bring in new technologies and focus our existing skills and resharpen the saw, if you will. you'll notice here, this is kind of a mini map of the different stations that we have. And people will pick different learning topics as they go to these individual stations, and then people can join them. And so this is also a great way that we've found to cross-pollinate teams and get people talking to each other who don't normally talk to each other. So it's a great way to foster camaraderie and things along those lines outside of your normal working teams, because you have people studying together on things that interest them at the time.
I would also like to say that your developers are always learning by giving them a time that's dedicated to do it. Hopefully they're doing less of that experimentation and learning in production. So we've had to deal with scale recently. We went from a 5-man development team to an 18-man development, well, 18-person development team in 6 months. We tripled our size. And so we've had to deal with, how do you preserve your culture? How do you keep good practices? How do you address all the things that happen when the majority of the people there are new? So we've come up with a couple of rules. The first one we've stolen from open spaces, which is if you're not contributing or not learning to a mob, leave it. Go to another one. We have open allocation. We do have requirements that a certain number of people need to be on each project. But if you don't want to be on this project, go to another one and negotiate with someone to come and replace you. Someone will. Because of that, we do change. We split, we grow, we mix. As we get new developers in, teams will grow to a size that where people are disinterested, disengaged, unable to concentrate. They'll split, become a new mob. And yeah, so we do have an average of 4 to 5 people. It has been up to, depending on the case, we've had 17 was our max. Everyone there was engaged. Everyone there was learning. It was an incredible experience. And production rules is that any production code needs to have at least 2 people look at it while it's being written. So you can pair if you want, or you can have more than 2. We don't care. Do what works for you.
So what we've been seeing is kind of a boost in quality, but not just in where you think for quality in code, but quality of life. See how happy he is right there? He's right there. He's very happy. He likes Mongo, apparently. And we also have quality of coworker relationships. And so we typically see that, like Jason said earlier, we have people hiking together. We have people playing board games together. We have a lot of interaction that's beyond this, that is not necessarily work related, outside of work. And we also get, quality of new hires. So see his face right there? Good quality. He's a new hire. Typically we see that grow and grow and grow. And so we've been through a recent round of trying to find people, and we've gotten a lot of great response out of this, and we even do our interviews this way. And so we have give a simulated mob programming experience during our interviews. In order to make this work, though, we need to honor our working agreement. And it's hard to work with people who are not kind, considerate, and respectful. So our kind of bottom line working agreement that everyone comes in every day agreeing to is that we will be kind, considerate, and respectful to everyone around us that we interact with all the time.
So, as people join a mob, we've noticed that there's some patterns that happen when they're learning this experience. The first of which is they're just sensory overload. You're being hit from so many different directions with new ideas, new concepts. Even if you know the language that you're working in, everybody there has something new in the language that you didn't know. And so you're just inundated, you're drinking from the fire hose. And so you don't tend to vocalize that much. You don't tend to navigate that much. You may do a little bit as you recognize things from your own experience, but a lot of people tend to just be in a mode of just absorb. Absorb and try to feel comfortable and find your pace. Once you get through that, you actually start feeling a little bit more comfortable, starting to recognize the patterns in the code that you're working in. And so you start navigating other people. Someone new to your group joins because teams form and change periodically. And you realize you know more than that person does, and you can help them. And so as you're sitting there and you're navigating and you're becoming more and more familiar and more comfortable, you suddenly hit a point where you got it. You're the person who has a brilliant idea. You're the person who has the knowledge. And so the reverse of what happened initially happens. You tend to take over. You're navigating all the time. And this is tiring. It hurts your vocal cords talking for 8 hours straight. And suddenly you realize that there has to be a balance. And that it's okay to know what you know and let someone else step up. When you hit that point, you're suddenly coaching. You're suddenly mentoring. You're suddenly teaching. And doing less of the work. You're allowing your team to kind of lift you up in places. And you, in turn, lift them up in places. And everybody ends up working better together.
I want to comment, when you kind of reach that sustainable navigation kind of stage where you can navigate all the time, but you're not going to, because you're going to allow the people that can also gain experience in navigation begin to learn. And so once you reach that level of maturity, you're now bringing forward the skill of the entire team and making that team sustainable so that if you leave to go to something else, they can continue on without you. And there's a kind of level of sophistication in that. And that's kind of also the safety net idea, is that they can be there, they can help make architectural decisions, and then also be able to navigate a navigator, is what we call it. And so you may be able to say, hey, you can navigate this part, this is the direction I'm going in. Let them take over while you think about the bigger picture. So one big area of how we arrived here is through Agile retrospectives. And so if you take anything away from this at all, you know, if it's not mob programming, it should be Agile retrospectives. So if you're not doing retrospectives, then you should do them. You should probably try reading this book once or twice and go ahead and host some for your teams if they're not already. How many people do regular retrospectives? Bi-weekly? Weekly? Daily? Anybody doing daily? Or impromptu? So there's kind of level of sophistication there. There's basically continual improvement as you work through those things.
And like I said earlier, mob programming really exists because of retrospectives. Yes, they ended up doing it, but once they had done it, what made them realize they had something really great was the time they took to reflect on it. And that also allowed them to do it better.
Do retrospectives vary by team?
Yes, definitely. Right now, because we're so new, we have a cadence of retrospectives, but where we want to get to and where we used to be was that we would have impromptu retrospectives. As soon as something happened that was noteworthy, everybody stop, let's huddle, let's talk about that. What was good, what was bad, how can we make what was good better?
How frequently do people switch teams, and how does that affect the retrospective attendance?
right now, there's only a few people who actually switch teams. Everybody has the option to, but everybody's still kind of norming. You know, it's all new. There's so much to absorb, and a lot of people are finding comfort in just sitting with the same people for a while. And we'll have to see how it ends up panning out.
And to add to that, we do see that we schedule time right now for retrospectives. And so in our older model, when we were just one team, we typically didn't really schedule the time. We just said, stop everything, you know, Toyota stop the line sort of thing. We'd stop everything, let's retrospect on that, and then let's see if we can make an improvement on what we just saw. What we have right now is weekly retrospectives for the teams, monthly retrospectives for the learning sessions, and bi-weekly retrospectives for the department.
So, Chris had mentioned earlier our mob timer. It's nice. I mean, the story of how it got to be developed was they were using a phone timer and then a kitchen timer, because the kitchen timer was louder, and they thought maybe if it was louder, people would listen to it. And someone happened to be all the way across the floor when the timer went off and heard someone else go, "What is that noise? Why does it always happen?" And so we realized that we should fix that. And so what happens now is it will blank out your entire screen, tell you who's up next, and ask you to change. It's kind of nifty, and it definitely helps break the momentum. And this is actually a good thing. The force break we found helps bring creativity. It forces everyone to disengage and move a little because you rotate. It occasionally encourages people to stand up. And it also forces people to think, are we on the right direction? Sometimes you can go, it's really easy to get in a rabbit hole if you're just doing one thing and not stopping. When you stop, when you have a forced stop, you suddenly stop and someone can go, wait a minute, are we doing the right thing? Is this the right direction? And so, yeah, and it's open source, and theoretically it works on Mac.
It could use some pull requests though.
PC version's good.
Along with that, we have 80-inch 4K monitors. Now these are great for seeing code 6 feet away. What they're not great at seeing is the cursor. We found that in one of our retrospectives, every single team, spent way too much time trying to figure out where the cursor was. And so we found another cursor, one that was big, bright, and red. And that has actually made our life a lot easier.
So here are a couple other tools that are kind of in progress or we're using currently, just for a good overview. We used to have projectors, and so it was interesting because on projectors you can laser point, right? On glossy screens, it reflects back at you and blinds you. So one thing that you want to avoid doing is blinding yourself and your fellow teammates. So what we've been working on is, this is a Windows-only app right now, but it's a pointer server. And basically you install it on the machine that you're trying to point on, and it creates a browser URL that you can go to that has a touch surface on it, and you can touch the screen of your phone or the screen of any other computer on the machine and move a pointer around to point to things on the main machine.
It too can use some pull requests.
Thank you. So you can let people use their cell phones, their tablets as laser pointers, essentially. It's really quite a cool thing, and it's kind of emerging in our team. We've tried doing this remotely from time to time on open source stuff, and tools like Join Me help a lot, obviously, but ways to take control and give control of the keyboard. We typically use, test-driven development, Kanban, approval tests, and then kind of importantly, code katas. And so what a kata is kind of an exercise that you go through over and over again. And it teaches, I think originally meant to teach pair programming or, and in reality, test-driven development as well. So what we typically do is you may have a kata for doing tic-tac-toe, for example. And you might write a brand new project and test drive its functionality and get through the functionality and practice test-driven. But what's great about it is you can also practice mobbing. You can practice navigation, you can practice driving, and typically in these exercises we have a dedicated navigator and a dedicated driver, and then we rotate them. So it's important to note that the driver is going to be entering the code but not thinking about the solution. They're going to be listening to the navigator who's thinking about the solution. If the driver has an idea about what they want to do, they actually say, can I navigate right now and switch with somebody else to go and drive? And so all the code has to be communicated in English first before it is written. And that's a big point to that as well. So I think we can ask for any questions right now. Yes?
How do you know you need more people on the team?
Typically, if the team is stuck on something, then it is a great opportunity for it. Or if it's the opposite of our heuristic, right? So if you're somewhere else and you could be learning here or you could be contributing here, then it's likely that we should have more people on that team.
So extending that question to hiring.
Yes.
How do you make hiring decisions, like,
Go ahead.
teams?
So we have a very extensive interview process right now. It's actually 4 hours, and that number was painstakingly arrived at. We wanted to take our kindness, consideration, and respect to the interview, and what we found is that when we did something less than that, we didn't actually give the candidate enough time to shine and feel that they were fairly evaluated. When we go over that, we destroy their day. And we've already destroyed most of their day, might as well give them some time off. And they leave looking fatigued. And so we ended up at 4 hours. And then in that, we have a very, very open interview process. We have programmers come in. We have a series of small problems for them to solve. But these problems are not in any way tricky. The point isn't to see what arcane bit of whatever they know. It is to find out how well they can think through a problem. How well can they communicate this problem? How much emotional intelligence do they show when working with people that are their junior? And just see how they respond to new things. How do they learn? That is what we're really looking for, is how emotionally connected are they, and how do they learn? Because if they can communicate and they can connect with people, and they are hungry to learn, I would rather have a junior that was hungry to learn and able to connect with people than a senior who didn't have those. And that's what we're really looking for.
What are some of the bottlenecks that arise with everybody on your team being engaged with writing the production code? Like, somebody could be doing something else, solo work, but they're engaged here, so that could sped up the workflow maybe?
Typically, we find that we eliminate the reluctance to test by having everybody work on the code together. So if you have people working alone, sometimes they might, so we kind of have a heuristic for testing, right? Test until bored. So if you're bored of testing it, then it's probably a good time to move off of it. typically people acting alone and not in a mob tend to get bored with testing faster, I've found. And so I think that from a quality standpoint, and actually ultimately that leading into a speed standpoint, because of the low bug rate, we typically get higher speeds than we would if we had somebody splitting off and doing their own thing.
And as far as solo tasks, we tend to mob even on our emails. All right? And the reason for this is email or telephone calls convey information. And the more people we have that information, the lower the lottery factor. And more likely that stuff is going to get done in a more reliable manner. And so typical things like email, phone calls, meetings that would normally be solo work become mob work. And the whole system seems to work better for that. Mind you, some people were slightly intimidated the first time we started doing this, but they've all gotten used to it.
Having 3 people think about the emotional intelligence of an email really helps before you send off something that sounds very abrasive.
That's awesome. I'm glad you bring up emotional intelligence. I was just on a call right before I got here, and it was interesting because we had a mom basically on a phone call, not the same way, but we're trying to solve a problem. And what I saw was that it took one of us saying, "I propose that we do this," you know, just to get something on the table. Do you find, like, what are your conversations for action in a sense, right? Like, how do you decide how to move forward?
Yeah, so we actually have multiple systems around this. So one of them is go with the most junior person's idea. So typically we have seniors in a mob, and what we like to see is if they have an idea and a junior has an idea, if they can't see a way to explain why we shouldn't do the junior's idea, then you have the junior navigate it, or you have the junior put that code into the production environment. And so, or even in a case where they're very insistent, we will go ahead and spike on the junior's idea to prove that it will work or will not work, so to speak. And so this kind of leads into a lot of benefits for us because we actually see that the seniors learn from the juniors too. And not just about being able to teach and being able to listen, but also technical things as well. We see that frequently.
You guys mob code review? Like other squads?
Four people are looking at the code when it's being written all the time, and we test everything. We test drive everything. And so typically we have not found the need for code review yet.
Can you talk about resource allocations, like 5 people working on one versus there could be 5 people working on 5 different projects? Like, how does that work from a resource allocation?
So before I go into direct to that, I want to say what happened to me when I was hired. Okay? I sat down with, at the time, the Director of Information Services, because the mob programming team was under the IS or IT department. And I had just gone through all my interviews, and I sat down with this director, and he looks at me and goes, "Have you ever mob programmed before?" "No, you guys kind of invented that." "Are you sure you want to do this?" "Yes." He's like, "Good, because we're not changing it. We have saved more money this year in bugs than the sum of their salaries." He was exaggerating, but it was he made it very clear that the money that they saved was enough that he wasn't going to change it. And so the way that resource allocation gets justified is we have such high quality and we've built so many small successes that the company has bought in, at least for now. If we jeopardize that and fail to deliver and start delivering things that have lots of bugs, we will probably lose it.
Question. Have you went back to a standard practice, so to speak, just to verify your mob Or just for a couple of weeks, you say, look, let's go for a standard agile way. Everyone does their own thing, and then do metrics on that.
I think that if we did, it would be because of a retrospective, and currently it's still going really, really well for us, and I don't know if we'd risk that just yet. I would say there is a risk in that.
So I've been sitting on this question, thinking, do I really want to ask this? But Jason, I think you kind of opened the door when you talked about your interview. I'm wondering, here are two statements, and I'm wondering which one of them you would agree with more, or if you would reject both of them and offer a third alternative. One is that everyone should be doing mock programming because it's awesome and it's a better way of working. The other statement is, there's a certain kind of person that has the right temperament or the right predisposition to work well with mock programming. And that's the kind of person who should work for an organization that does mock programming. And people who don't have that temperament might be better suited in a different organization. And I'm wondering, which of those is true, or is that a false choice?
We don't recommend that anybody does this.
Okay.
So this is something that you can try, and you can retrospect with, right? And so, in that, I mean, so yes, there might be people that can't operate under the pretense of kindness, consideration, and respect. And if they can't, then that might not be the type of person that would want to operate in an environment like that.
But actually, maybe there's someone who can be kind, considerate, and respectful, but they're very introverted, and they really just prefer to work alone. By the way, I'm not that person. I think I would flourish in this mock programming environment. But I have students who really, really don't like pairing. And I'm wondering whether I'm doing them a disservice by trying to really, really push them in that direction.
Yeah, let me ask just what we know.
Oh, I was going to say something to him about what he just said, because he's a teacher. Many moons ago, 20 years ago, I went to graduate school at UCSB in molecular biology and suffered from what I thought I had named, but now it's a well-known term called imposter syndrome.
Yes.
In that I kept my mouth shut and stayed out of the way because people who had passed their first orals, people who were doing their postdocs, they all knew more than I did, and it was the only grad school I got into. And if you guys think a 4-hour job interview is tough, grad school interviews are like 3 days. So 4 hours is nothing. What I believe is that over time I became more comfortable because you become part of the group. In the beginning, people are probably intimidated and shy, and then they grow out of it as they become comfortable, which is part of the thing they explained is in the steps that you go through is sort of the steps I went through in graduate school of I don't really belong here, I just got my bachelor's degree, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, I've never done lab work, to being able to contribute in the weekly meetings about articles and stuff. It's just I think anyone can learn it and take it from me who's an extroverted introvert. If I can learn to be comfortable in a group, I think almost anyone can.
Let me ask a question, I'll get to you. Real quick, I want to say, in our group, we have a couple of very strong introverts. One of which is actually giving a talk at the Big Agile Conference about being an introvert. All right? He's stepping way out of his comfort zone. And what's interesting is both of them say they would never work another way again. Because they can see the benefit of it, and they have personally grown from this exercise. That being said, I want to reiterate again, we know our context, we understand it works for us. The only thing we actually recommend is retrospect.
Well, I was just going to, my question is somewhat related to this and that. I assume that when you put a mob together of programmers, they have to be similar levels in their knowledge of coding and stuff, because then it would seem like the senior would jump in and say, oh, I know how to do that, and he could do it in 10 minutes, maybe the junior would take an hour.
Come in the blue box so you can get it.
Hi, my name is Paul. I also work at Hunter. I am a junior developer, and it's actually, no, I constantly work with seniors, especially I was learning I was especially in, like, I was moving to a Node, and I never really touched it until 2 months ago, a month ago maybe, and basically they explain it to you while they're navigating the first couple times, and then as they step back, you know, let's say a week later or something like that, they'll start talking about, well, how would you go about this? And you type it, or you tell the driver how to type it and go through it. And if you're wrong, like, well, let's think about it this way maybe, and why. And it helps them as the seniors learn it in a greater degree, because teaching something is harder, and you have to know a greater knowledge of explaining the what ifs and all those kind of funny things. Additionally, it helps the student or the junior person learn faster as well by seeing the patterns develop and how to go from there, and have that person guide you in the right direction. So no, it actually doesn't. It works better. I think it works better as far as getting everyone up to speed faster with a greater amplitude of skill levels. You had a question?
So it seems like there's a lot of benefits just from hearing of mob programming. I've never heard of mob programming before, but it seems like something that I would be interested in. But I'm just wondering, from your experience in mob programming, are there any cons at all?
No. I mean, there's a lot of things that people have to get used to. And yeah, so this is kind of the idea of exposure. And so one thing that we found is that we actually had people on the team, so before we mobbed, we didn't know this. We had people on the team that were hunt-in peck typing. They had like an average word count of about 15 words a minute or less. And because you're in a mob, that's immediately exposed. And we started spending learning sessions on touch typing games and playing those. And so those things do become exposed. It's difficult though, right? Because you are admitting to everyone around you that this is something that is happening. And you may not even realize it's a problem until you have it brought up in a retrospective or something along those lines. Not specifically targeted at you, but people noticing that the level of the team's typing is not up to par. There's also, we had people that were spending 80% of their day running database scripts to keep production alive. And we found that in automating those things, we reclaimed 80% of that person's day. So, you know, those are kind of big hurdles to get over, and that's the kindness, consideration, and respect sort of thing. We also, obviously, convincing people to do this is a little bit difficult. So, and once you do have it, it becomes easier over time as you gain successes, but there is a pressure to find the value quickly. And I think that one thing that we had that really helped us get by that was essentially wholehearted buy-in on this way of doing things. First from a manager level, then to a director level, and then now to president of the company has bought into it and has expanded out the teams. And so that happened very slowly. That happened over 4 years. But those are the difficulties that come to mind. You have.
I'll just add to the exposure. I'm a terrible, terrible person when it comes to spelling. Everybody on my team knows it. And so I had to be okay with that. I mean, things like that. Those are really the only real problems that I've seen. That, and you have to learn to really be social. You know, I learned a lot my first couple months about how to actually communicate with people, not just tell them what to do. And that was a very difficult lesson for me.
Do you have like any advice in how to transition from like a team that's used to working in standard practices and then transition to this? Like, are deadlines not met because like you're in this new environment?
So I believe that the way we had the room to be able to do this was through the learning sessions. So there were a few things put in place at the time that helped us. tremendously. One was 1 hour a day for learning session. Spend time outside of your work time to learn and grow. We were doing coding katas, and katas, dojos, things along those lines. And that gave us the opportunity to work this way without, on play code, essentially. And under the guise, I guess, of learning how to pair and learning how to do test-driven development. But what it ultimately turned into was a group of 4 people or more working together, communicating verbally, communicating through well-defined code, high-quality code, and things along those lines.
I can add on to what you just said. About 3 years ago or so, we stumbled on your YouTube video, and so we said, "Oh, let's try this." And we said, "What's the best way to get started?" And we decided to take like a really hard problem. We didn't take a bug, we didn't take a kata, we just took a really hard bug. It turned out that's the same way you guys got started, a really hard problem. And that's, I could say in retrospect now, that's probably one of 2 ways to get started. That way or the coding katas, because I think you alluded to this, wanting to do an A/B test of some kind. Yeah, if you do a coding kata, you can try it either way and see which way works better for your team. But pick a really hard problem and work it. And again, doing retrospectives is also very important. We were doing retrospectives daily or multiple times a day to make sure we were to rev it up, to get good at doing it until we'd been doing it for a few weeks, and then we started relaxing the retrospective intervals because it wasn't as necessary. So that would be my recommendation to everybody, is to do very frequent retrospectives and pick a really hard problem to start.
So I have a question about code ownership and maintenance. Let's say a team works, a mob team works on a project, completes it, and then the team dissolves, everyone works on something else. What happens if there are bugs or issues discovered later? Who picks up work on those items?
So, a couple of interesting things. Our mobs are not our teams. We have one team of 18 people. So that's the first thing. We do everything we can to try to treat it as such. There are things as we're growing that we're finding that we're starting to divide into 2 teams. But we're trying to keep us as one team. The second thing is we look at defects as the ultimate. Think of it like assembly line. If someone gets caught in the assembly line, you hit the big red button. We look at bugs at that level. If a bug comes back in production, even for code we didn't write, because we have a number of legacy systems that were written 5 years before this even started, that we're maintaining. A bug gets reported in a production system, everything else stops, even if the bug was in a lower valued system. There are exceptions. Obviously, if you're like in the middle of a critical release, you get the critical release done first. However, in general, we stop everything, put together a team, fix the bug, and fix it right. We do it with tests. We figure out if there's a way to automate it, and we fix it. We don't ever want to see a bug come back, and we treat these things very, very, very seriously.
So you have a team of 18 people. You have a team of 18 people and no stand-ups. How do you manage your backlog?
How about you,
Doug? We have buy-in from at the president level in the company to have dedicated product owners that can be with us all the time. And we try and only maintain a backlog of 1 or 2 items. And the idea is that they can change their mind as much as they want until we ask them what they want to do next. And then we do that. And then we continue operating that way, and we pick off things as they are high priority items. And we try and do this development all the way through the stack to go ahead and tackle them right away. Other than that, architectural changes are communicated between mobs, typically verbally, because those things kind of spread. If you have 2 mobs, 8 people, you can verbally communicate that everybody's already in a group and things along those lines.
I'm actually really interested in how you guys interact and how maybe, I don't even know if this is the right term, but your hierarchy works and how you guys deal with conflicts and problem resolution and you know, it's great when everybody's like on the same page with everything, but that doesn't always happen.
So this is kind of the thing with defer to the least experienced person. So if there's any conflicts about code, we stop, we defer to the least experienced person. We go with their idea. If there's something that they need to prove out for themselves, I mean, they're very conscious about the time that they're taking away from everyone else if they are sure of something like that. And but we will stop if there's something that we want to try and go ahead and prove out.
So they have some idea, they think it's going to work, but it's untested. You say, all right, well, let's try it out.
Yeah, and especially, I mean, so the senior has the opportunity to try and preempt that and tell them why they wouldn't want to do that, and then they have the choice of going forward with it or not. And we try and typically work with that. And that's kind of the kindness, consideration, and respect. We're going to consider your idea. We're going to become kind with the time. We're going to help learn. We're going to, teach, learn, etc. So that typically kind of boils out into that.
Just to add on to that, I found that the easiest way to mentor that way is to just add another test. There's always a way you can write a test in order to show that something is wrong. And if you can encourage the team to write that test, then oftentimes that is what guides them without being hostile or commanding.
Test until you're bored.
Yeah, it's a question about the learning sessions. So just a general idea of like what sorts of things you talk about. Is it work related or industry stuff in general? And then also how did that get started and how did you get buy-in to that?
So the manager at the time, Woody Zool, he had put that in place. So that was just something that he did. Agile coach, great Agile coach. Basically he started off right off the bat saying, okay, we're doing learning sessions now. During those learning sessions, I think at the time kind of mandated code katas, but ultimately it has morphed over time. So we have learning session retrospectives. And now, I'm not sure how many people have been to an open space conference. They're fantastic conferences and you should go to them. But the Agile Open conferences had influenced us to basically make this a kind of marketplace for different learning experiences. And so kind of over here, it's like C#, functional, JavaScript, exorcisms, Node.js, something along those lines. We're kind of all over the place. I believe you have a learning session going right now on Elixir. We typically, there's also soft skills learning sessions. If anybody's familiar with Toastmasters, we have people that go to Toastmasters for that hour instead of coming into the office right away. So we work on public speaking, we work on, all these skills kind of play into it. It's not just the technical skills that are important to us.
It sounds a lot like the mob programming. You go with the goose and golden egg analogy. The golden egg is the mob programming, but the goose that laid it is these learning sessions and your retrospectives. So I'm wondering, it sounds like you do retrospectives at the mob level and at the whole team level, at the level of like 4 people and like the level of 18 people. I'm really curious about the great big retrospective, kind of how that goes and how it's different from the small one.
Yeah, they're longer. Yeah, so that's a great point. And typically, the last one that we did for the department ended up in we went healthier snacks. So like that was so that was like that is kind of a decision that so people are happy with the department except for the snacks, and that was like kind of something that we wanted to push forward. We also practice a flat department structure right now, and this is kind of when our teams merged and started growing. I'd been reading a lot about flat department structures. I actually kept everything flat and try and keep all of my actions flat along to align with everyone else. There are certain things that I see that other people can't, but other than that, I try and push all of my responsibilities and everything alongside with the team, and I try and develop with the team as well.
I've got a few questions. That's awesome, by the way. Like David said, we've done some mobbing, but most of them we do pairing. So the team's good at mobbing. Your team probably has more than anyone else. Another team that does it. But so I've got some questions that relate to problems we've run into. I'm just curious how you guys handle it. First off, just could you
We didn't. So I had been following Woody's talks, and he'd been doing a lot of talks on Agile and things like that. I said, oh, I want to go work with him. He knows what he's doing. I've been working in too much of a waterfall environment. I'm going to go work with him. I did the interview. I get there. I've accepted the position. Totally waterfall. And so it was crazy. And so I was totally blown away. I said, Woody, what happened? Like, what is going on here? I didn't realize that this was what was going on. And he said, oh, yeah, we're working on it. And these are the things that we've been doing, and I want to encourage pairing. And we jumped over pairing. It went from we're doing work individually in their own cubes and so on and so forth to growing into large groups. That doesn't mean other people haven't done it.
This is where I want to put my 2 cents in. Before this, I had done quite a bit of pairing. One of the things I used to do is I used to take my laptop to Barnes & Noble and watch the computer programming section. And when I see someone looking at programming books, walk up with my laptop and say, hey, I'm trying an experiment. Would you pair with me for about an hour? And you would be surprised how many people said yes. And so what I can tell you for me, the difference between pairing and mobbing was, first off, I was used to being an expert. I'm a legacy code guy, and I'm used to coming in when the crap is at the fan and people need them to bail them out. And so I was an expert. I haven't felt like I was drowning in a long time. When I entered the mob, I suddenly felt like I was drowning. And the reason was I had never seen code move so fast. It seemed like swaths of the project would just change in an hour. In a day, the code would not look like what I've seen the day before, because it just moved continuously. Because someone gets up to go to the bathroom to get coffee, gets pulled into a meeting, the code still continues. And for me, this was frightening. I had to learn that I didn't have to swim. I just had to go with the ride. And suddenly it all became easier. And that to me was the biggest change, because pairing could be exhausting. But at the end of the day, not nearly as much stuff changed. We weren't nearly as brave. And we didn't do nearly as much testing to gain that courage. And so that was my difference.
A couple other questions. This is just real pragmatic. How well do the whiteboards work to block the sound?
I'll let you answer that.
Those whiteboards that we have, they're magnetic, and so they have a big sheet of metal in them. And so typically, that room actually, it's kind of interesting because you see it has the wooden floors. It's got a very echoey sort of. Once we put those in, I actually ordered 2 more specifically just to get more of them in there because the sound levels were getting too high. And so, even now we're thinking about doing like sound dampening curtains between stations, but because everything's on wheels, that could morph into something else, and so we're trying to figure something out for the sound. But the level of sound dropped significantly once we had magnetic whiteboards in.
Question. This sort of touches on something that was mentioned earlier, but sounds like you have a good hiring process, but I'm sure you less than perfect people slip through from time to time, and that's a challenge for us in the pairing environment. Sometimes to really quickly detect people who just aren't working out for like a respect issue, right? How do you guys deal with that in a mob setting?
Okay, so one thing that we do during our interviews is we actually have a lean coffee retrospective at the end of every interview. So we start out with the technical, we blast through the technical stuff, get a good idea of what they know and don't know. And then for the emotional intelligence side of it, we actually go through a lean coffee, and we typically vote for the stuff that the person who applied had brought up. And typically that gives us a good picture of their personality as we do it. And so how many people are familiar with like lean coffee? So it's like a Kanban of discussion. So you have to do, doing, and done. Everybody sources topics in the beginning, you dot vote on the topics, you operate on them in the order of the dot vote, and you have basically 5 minutes to talk about it, and then maybe a 2-minute timer, and you Roman vote whether or not to continue talking. And it's a time-boxed sort of dialogue format. So we do that with the interview candidate, and typically they're saying strange stuff, or they bring up something weird. Typically it'll slip unexpectedly, and we'll be like, that was weird. Typically we end up finding those types of things up front.
I'd also like to say that out of everyone we've hired so far, we haven't had that problem. Now, our process isn't perfect. I actually fear it probably goes the other way, that we let a few people go potentially that may have been good, we just didn't recognize it. But as far as the people we've hired, we've not had a problem with them yet.
Well, I was just going to say, I interviewed last week with a company that they have everybody working at home, but the first thing they gave me, and I'm waiting to hear the results, was a personality test. So maybe that might be something.
Yeah, my question was actually a little bit different though. It's like, so when somebody gets in and they're in the mob, say, the problem, it's not really a problem, but in a sense it can be, is that there's so much support and nurture going on that if someone's just not cutting mustard because they just, I don't know, sometimes interest, sometimes they just don't have what it takes. Like just mentioned, they're not keep up to the task. Like, how do you, maybe I've run across this problem, but how do you deal with that in that context? Because they kind of fly under the radar because it's so easy to not stick out as the underperformer. You know what I mean?
Actually, it's very hard to not stick out.
Yeah.
Everything comes up. Like, you are so exposed, it's not even funny. Like, we know every inch of the corner, every corner of the language that you're using that you don't know, we hit it, we find out. It's really scary how much you can see in just a day of working with somebody. Because in 8 hours of working that closely, that integrally, rotating every 7 minutes, so 7 times 5 is how, 35. Every 35 minutes you're at the keyboard for 7 minutes. And that's quite a lot of time that you get in front of somebody. And then the quality of the input that you give, even as a junior, or as a new person, sorry, not junior, but as a new person, when you're going through that stage of being quiet, the questions that people ask or don't ask really becomes illuminating. And you start seeing what's happening. And so far, everyone we've dealt with, we've been able to see very clearly from that what they know and don't know, and all of it's been proven true.
And correctable, it sounds like.
Yeah, totally, because we have the learning sessions. We're very gentle. You know, if we think someone needs to learn something, and they're not seeming to catch on to it, we will gently tell them, hey, you know what, maybe you should take a look at this, because I think it'll help you. And if you want help, you know, since I'm bringing it up, I will offer my time to help you with it. And yeah, it helps.
I might have missed this, but how often do you guys have your learning sessions like every week?
Every day, hour a day.
An hour a day?
The first hour of every morning, and then on top of that, the last 2 hours of every Friday. It's a great way to start the day. You start the day energized, kind of ready to get into things.
And is the teachers just basically your coworkers, like the senior people, or do you actually bring like people in?
Most of the time, most of these learning sessions are teacher-free. It is co-op learning. I want to learn this thing. Who wants to learn it with me?
We do conferences and the traditional, on-site trainings and things like that. But this is more of where do you think your skills can go right now, and how can you work on them to improve them, and let's make that available. And that might be interpersonal communication, that might be emotional intelligence, that might be functional programming, that might be JavaScript, that might be C#, wherever everyone thinks that they need to improve, they can go ahead and spend the time and improve there. What we see is that over time, You know, it's kind of like, so, you know, the whole resharpening the saw, right? Like you're chopping down a tree, your saw gets dull, eventually chopping down trees becomes really slow because the saw, you know, and people get dull over time, right? And so if you're not doing the learning sessions and you're not studying outside of work, then where is your skill going? It's slowly deteriorating over time, just like a saw would after sawing multiple trees, right? So you need to resharpen the saw somehow. You either spend time at home doing it or you have it dedicated. What happens is people have families and people end up making more life commitments outside of work, and time that they would have been spending at studying outside of work is going to diminish over time. And what happens there is that you typically, it's reasonable to say that if they don't get the training at work, then it's likely not to come. And so typically this is to keep the saw sharp so we can cut through problems very quickly.
How flexible you guys? Say like a group wanted to work like an hour wasn't enough, and they wanted to sharpen their saw like another extra hour. How lenient are you guys on that?
So we're in the stages of building trust still, as we've been merged with another organization. And so I would say that I would be okay with it, but I don't know if the people above me would. And so right now that's kind of our max, but over time I do hope to grow that time because I think that the benefit that we see has been typically really good. And I think that like Google does 2 hours a day, right? And so like it is something that is out there and that it's heard of, you know, and so it's just a matter of allocating the time.
There have been a couple occasions where people have done specialized deep dives, like for two days, 2-3 days. Like, you know, I'm sorry, we're going to take a little extra time here during this because we think this can pay out immediately to what we're doing, and we just want to dive kind of deep. And we let that happen. You know, a couple of people have done this with security training. You know, we're starting to do new web development, and people are like, we need to understand web security better. We want to do a deep dive. Well, that kind of made sense, but it isn't a general rule.
Can you guys tell us a little bit about like some of those values that are up there? Start obvious, stay obvious.
Yeah.
That's right. This was training that we just recently received from Diana Larson. It's the courageous learning, right? Yeah, heroic learner. This is the 5 rules of heroic learner. Basically, she's identified these as being the 5 rules that encourage learning. And
yeah, so real quick, keep it alive. So they have the idea of measuring aliveness. And actually, we're doing something here called code cooking, which Willem Larson, her son, helped invent. And it's a build on code katas. And so the idea is you measure aliveness while you're code cooking. But I won't go too much into that. But for being a heroic learner, and you know, you might get her book or have her come and do a training for you. But the idea is keeping it alive. You're not going to retain information if you're not engaged or not alive. And so you can kind of say like, you know, how alive am I right now? I'm 4, right? Like you can kind of gauge, you know, 1 through 5, and so or 1 through 10 or whatever. And so the idea is keeping it alive, then setting first, rearranging the room. How easy is it to make it so that you can maximize your learning experience? For us, we have everything on wheels, and she was very impressed because we actually moved whole stations out of the way. We cleared out a large open space in the middle of the floor so that we could do this training. And so setting first is basically how make it so that you can absorb the most out of your learning experience. Do it for real means, you know, take something that you're learning, put it into some real application or use it somehow. Start obvious, stay obvious is kind of what it sounds like. Basically, you know, keep it simple and make small incremental growths rather than trying to make some big leap. You know, it's like oh, I know Italian now, I'm going to try and speak it to somebody fluent. You know, it doesn't work that way, right? You have these small incremental things that you build on over time, and then focus on flow. Like, you know, keep all of these things together and being able to flow and continue going forward. And so this was really cool, and I think that the team got a lot out of it. You guys get a lot out of it? They're nodding. Anything else?
Yeah, it might help for me and others maybe know more about the kinds of work that you do, kinds of work that you found work well for mob programming.
Yeah, so when we first started doing this, we were doing internal applications for different departments. So you know, the main source of revenue for Hunter is injection molded plastic parts, right? So here, sprinklers, right? So the idea is that initially we wrote software to help things in manufacturing and sales and customer service and things like that. Internal applications go better. There's a separate
lubricant.
Yeah, business lubricant is what Jason liked to call it. And so these were great small applications to do fast iterations on, get dedicated product owners for, and be able to iterate quickly on. And so we were able to get stuff into production very quickly. There's an application that we somebody had an idea for, and we got it into production in under 2 weeks. And we were able to start iterating on it right away, and it was a great experience. Then slowly our level of quality had drawn the attention of outside product development, and 4 years later we were merged together with the external product development team, and we've started doing things externally. So now we're talking about software to support millions of customers, and we're kind of in a different paradigm right now. That's part of our explosive growth. So we're still doing those old applications that are for large internal systems, but now we're actually expanding out to large-scale products development as well.
The two teams you said you're kind of almost turning into?
No, but both those teams are external product development, and so it's, yeah, but that's because there's a need there right now. But we're continuing to hire up to be able to support the internal projects that we had before as well, and continue to build on them and iterate on them.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Couple last things before you all go. I'll keep it quick. There are some feedback forms that they're in the box. Okay. That I'm going to pass out here. When you're done, if you could just put the forms back in the box. We actually read all of the feedback and we use it to try to improve our meetups and keep them engaging and informative. So ultimately, in the end, it's for all of you. Also, we encourage you to join us at the Imperial Lounge right now after this meetup. It's a great way to continue your conversations and networking. Have a drink if you like. It is located at, I think, 320 South Kellogg Avenue in Old Town Goleta. It's right on Hollister and Kellogg, a little parking like a plaza there. If you've never been there before, Google can tell you how to get there. You can come ask me. But it's when you get there, if you go to the furthest back portion of the parking lot, like the darkest portion of the parking lot, there's a white door. It used to be unmarked, so you kind of had to be in the know. But I think it now says the Imperial Lounge on it. So it's probably on most of your way home. So join us there. And be here next month for our next meetup on Wednesday, April 6th with Lorraine Aguilar. She'll be talking about the art of appreciation. Thanks.